Krishna.
Everyone's ready? So we'll start.
Ready.
Today I'm going to read from, or it depends where you are, it could be almost night or morning, but I'm going to read from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 7.
Я буду сегодня читать.
It's called Knowledge of the Absolute. So those who have a book, they can follow along. Aprayamitas tvam yam prakriti vidime param jiva bhutam mahabaho yedam daryate jagat. Besides these, almighty armed Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mind, which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Here it is clearly mentioned that living entities belong to the superior nature or energy of the Supreme Lord. The inferior energy is matter manifested in different elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Both forms of material nature, namely gross, earth, etc., and subtle mind, etc., are products of the inferior energy. The living entities who are exploiting these inferior energies for different purposes are the superior energy of the Supreme Lord. And it is due to this energy that the entire material world functions. The cosmic manifestation has no power to act unless it is moved by the superior energy, the living entity. Energies are always controlled by the energetic, and therefore the living entities are always controlled by the Lord. They have no independent existence. They are never equally powerful as unintelligent men think. The distinction between the living entities and the Lord is described in Srimad Bhagavatam 10:87-30 as follows. Aparimita druvas tanu brito yadi sarvagatas tarhina shas yetiti niyamo dhruva nitarata ajani chayan mayam tad avimucha ni yantri bhavet samam anu janatam tad amatam mata dushtaya. O Supreme Eternal, if the embodied living entities were eternal and all-pervading like you, then they would not be under your control. But the living entities are accepted as minute energy. But if the living entities are accepted as minute energies of your lordship, then they're at once subject to your supreme control. Therefore, real liberation entails surrender by the living entities to your control. And that surrender will make them happy. In that constitutional position, only can they be controllers. Therefore, men with limited knowledge who advocate the monistic theory that God and living entities are equal in all respects are actually guided by a faulty and polluted opinion. Supreme Lord Krishna is the only controller, and all living entities are controlled by him. These living entities are his superior energy because the quality of their existence is one and the same with the Supreme. But they are never equal to the Lord in quantity of power. While exploiting the gross and subtle inferior energy matter, the superior energy, the living entity, forgets his real spiritual mind and intelligence. This forgetfulness is due to the influence of matter upon the living entity. But when the living entity becomes free from the influence of the illusory material energy, he attains the stage called mukti or liberation. The false ego, under the influence of material illusion, thinks, I am matter, and material acquisitions are mine. His actual position is realized when he is liberated from all material ideas, including the conception of his becoming one in all respects with God. Therefore, one may conclude that the Gita confirms the living entity be only one of the multi-energies of Krishna. And when this energy is freed from material contamination, it becomes fully Krishna conscious or liberated. One second. I just liberated a fly. One time Prabhupada picked up a cockroach, took it to the window, and dropped it out of the window and said, now I give you the whole world. So this is the text again. Prayamitastvanyam prakriti vidime param shiva bhuta mahabaho yedam darete jagat. Besides these almighty armed Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mind which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. Namo Vishnu Varaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Ramane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Shnivadi Paskadyade Siddharna. The Bhagavad Gita is the foundation book for our understanding Krishna consciousness. And basically speaking, though when we read Bhagavad Gita, we'll find out the same subject matters are expressed again and again and again. Principally that we're eternal, that Krishna is the supreme eternal. We have an eternal relation with Krishna, and that can be revived by the process of devotional service. So much of Prabhupada's lectures on the Bhagavad Gita, much of the philosophy and the purpose of Bhagavad Gita is just meant to convince us, or at least intellectually understand by analogies and philosophy, that we are eternal and that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we do have a relationship with him. And that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the controller of everything. He's the enjoyer of everything. And he's the friend of everyone. Now, in the previous verse, Krishna has explained about his gross and subtle material energies. So now he's going to explain, he explains in this verse about his superior energy, the living souls. That's ourselves. So just like in the body, Krishna, there are superior and inferior parts. The brain and the other parts where we pass stool and urine. So also Krishna has superior and inferior energy. So he expresses that here as apara, which means inferior energy, which are the gross and the subtle elements that Krishna has explained in the previous verse, namely earth, water, fire, air, ether, and then the subtle elements, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Now Krishna is going to explain about the para prakriti, that is the living entities, ourselves, who are moving this material nature. So everything is God, everything is coming from Krishna, but still Krishna has inferior and he has superior energies. It's not all one. So those who don't make any distinction between Krishna's superior and inferior energies, they're called Mayavadis or impersonalists. But the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, simultaneously one and different. So in the 13th chapter, Krishna said, Maya tatamidam sarvam jagaravyakta muratina mastani sarvabhutani na chaham teshu vashtitaha. That in my unmanifested, in my impersonal form, I'm pervading all this creation. Everything is resting in me, but I'm not actually there. Just like in the jail department is also part of the government. But the president doesn't live in the jail. We can say that the president is controlling the jail department, but that doesn't mean that he lives in the jail. Similarly, Krishna is controlling the entire creation, but that doesn't mean that Krishna is entangled in the material creation or is imprisoned by the material creation. So although Krishna is everywhere, it's actually that he's not there. His energies are everywhere. His energies are acting everywhere. Material energies move under the influence of the spiritual energy. They cannot act independently. A city may be very great, like Moscow or New York or Lima, Peru, wherever you are. But without the living entities there, without the souls there, it has no meaning. A city is great because of the activities that go on by the souls that live there. So the material nature doesn't work independently. It doesn't work by itself. It works because of the touch of the spirit that moves it. So a child, they may understand that a car or an airplane is moving because there is, or I should say, a child may not be able to understand that a motor car or a plane is moving because there's a driver or a pilot. Therefore, those who have no information of the spiritual energy behind the material energy are children, or like children, we could say. They're foolish children, and in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna calls them mudhas. Namam diskritino muda prapadyante naradama maya apritagyanam asram bhavam ashritya. Those who are foolish, the lowest among men, whose knowledge has been stolen by illusion, partake of the atheistic nature of the demons and are sinful, these are known as diskretinas. Materially speaking, we have many philosophers and scientists and educators who appear to be learned, but actually, according to Bhagavad Gita, they're just like children. A child may be very expert in manipulating his toys. He can build a whole city from erectus, what's called an erectus set. But after all he's doing is taking the already earth, water, fire, air, and ether and just moving it in different directions. But because he doesn't know about the person who's moving it, even himself, therefore he's childish. Prabhupada used to call this civilization digging holes in the ground and building buildings, and then breaking the buildings, and then digging more holes to build another building. So just breaking and building. But no real understanding of the person who's doing all this work. Therefore, an ordinary person can't understand that behind this gigantic, wonderful material energy, there is a supreme energy, the spiritual energy, namely Krishna. Therefore, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Manushanam sahasreshu kaschid yaradi siraye yatatam api siddhanam kaschimam vete tatvataha. That out of many, many thousands of people, one may actually endeavor for perfection. So perfection means to understand that we're not this body. We may acquire so many material assets. We may learn so many things in this lifetime. But after all, at the end of this body, then we have to go somewhere else. And everything we accomplish, we can't bring with us. We have to leave it behind. Most people don't understand that. They're busy working in order to improve their material circumstances or to avoid some undesirable circumstance. But out of all those people in the material world, some of them may endeavor for perfection. And of all those who have achieved perfection, who understand that they're not their body, hardly one actually knows Krishna as he really is, who's actually behind this material energy. Therefore, Krishna says, Tribhira Gunamayir Bhavar, Ebik Savar Midam Jagat, Mohitam Nabijanati, Mamebhyak Param Avyam. That I have never met those who are bewildered by the illusory energy in the form of the three modes of material nature. They can't understand that I'm behind this material energy. Ye Chaiva Satika Bhava. That there are three modes. Those who are in darkness, the mode of ignorance, they have no conception of how the material world is working, nor do they have any interest. Most people in the material world are satisfied if they can get something to eat and watch a football game. Then their life is more or less complete. And if you talk to them, the only thing they know is how many children they have and what kind of job they have. Besides that, everything is too subtle. So even the important scientists and philosophers, they're simply studying this material energy, but they have no information about the spiritual energy. But it's the spiritual energy that's actually important. Which is actually important? The person driving the car, or the person flying the airplane, or the airplane. If you take the driver, if you take the pilot away, then the car can't move, nor can the airplane fly. Therefore, it's the spirit that's controlling the material nature. Unfortunately, when one is an illusion, the material energy controls the spirit. So those who are so-called important scientists and philosophers, although they study the material nature very thoroughly, because they don't study the spiritual energy, therefore they're simply under the control of the three modes of material nature. And although they think they're accomplishing so many things, but actually it's this three modes of material nature are simply forcing them to do different activities in the name of so-called progress of civilization. Of course, without knowing about the spirit, you can't really have a civilization. One time Gandhi went to England, and when he was there, he was asked, "What do you think of English civilization?" And his reply was, "I think that would be a good idea." So though people are very proud of the cities they had built, they're proud of their armies, they're proud of their inventions, but because they don't know about either themselves as being spiritual beings, and that their goal of life is to become eternal, or the supreme eternal spirit who's moving the creation, and as Paramatma is directing their wanderings, noting down their desires, and trying to convince them to utilize the human form of life as a great opportunity to realize their eternality and their eternal relationship with him, Krishna. And for those who are unwilling, who are like children, who want to simply play with the material nature, just like sometimes a father will allow his children to go to the beach and build sandcastles. And the child is actually thinking they're accomplishing something very important. But then at the end of the day, the father will take their children and they'll go home, and the sea will come and wash the sandcastle away. So though the child was convinced he was doing something very important, actually in the course of time, everything just gets washed away. So the Purusha who is moving the material nature, that's Krishna, and the souls of the Prakriti who are being pushed. Behind, just like a machine is activated by the person who controls it. That is Purusha. The machine is Prakriti. Behind the machine of this material world is Krishna, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Maya dakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunonena kundiya jagat viparivartate. Just like in a powerhouse, there's a supervising engineer. He's making sure the machine, the mechanics of the machine are oiled, they're maintained, the proper fuel is provided, That without the supervising engineer, nothing, the machine will not actually work. And including that, our body is just like a machine. There's so many things going on in our body. We cut our finger, we have no idea, no one has any idea how that part is being repaired. If someone breaks your window, then you call the person to come and replace it. He knows exactly what to do in order to replace the window. He can tell you in detail, and you can do it also. But if you cut your finger, who's the person you call to come and replace your finger? No one knows how to do it. You can put a Band-Aid on it so you can't see it, but the Band-Aid won't replace it. But by the inconceivable energy, Achinta Shakti, that is provided with every body, that somehow or another, through the arrangement of Krishna, that part is repaired. Similarly, this body has so many inconceivable energies that we have no idea how they work, but they work by superior direction. Now, due to our presence in the body, they work. When we leave the body, they don't work anymore. Like our hair grows, but if we leave, because we're in the body, we're providing the energy, or Krishna is providing the energy, and we're also providing our energy so that this hair is growing. But when we leave the body, after some time, the hair will stop growing because the energy is not being provided. As long as the plug is connected to the socket, the machine may work. But if you pull the plug out of the socket and the energy is not provided anymore, then the machine stops working. Similarly, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yanti Deva, that Yantra Rudani Maya, Ishvara Sarabhutanam Rideshe Arjuna Tishtati, Brahmayan Sarabhutani Yantra Rudani Maya. That the Supreme Lord is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material nature. So our very near and dear body that we're so much connected to or attached to is actually just a machine made from the material nature. And we ourselves are the passengers in the body, and Krishna is the driver. Now we may, just like a child on a roller coaster, he may be having a good time on the roller coaster. But actually, he can't do anything. Once he's on the roller coaster, sometimes he goes up and sometimes he goes down. Sometimes when he's going down, he's afraid. And when he goes up, he's confident. So the material, this machine that we're in is just like, we're riding it just like a roller coaster. Sometimes we're very enthusiastic about our material existence, and sometimes it appears that we're going to crash and we become disturbed. But we're not even the driver, nor are we've created the roller coaster. This is provided to us. We're simply the passenger. Sometimes probably compares it to being in an ocean where the waves are tossing and turning. There's nothing we can do about the waves. We can't tell the waves stop tossing and turning. They're going to toss and turn. Sometimes we appear to be floating and sometimes we appear to be drowning in that ocean. So the ocean material existence is just like that. Sometimes it appears we're above the waves and that we're going to float in the water, and sometimes it appears that we're sinking and drowning in the waves of material existence. So Krishna tells the material nature to give us a body according to our desire. It is not by accident that we have this present body, nor is it unjust. Sometimes they ask, oh, how can a little child, only a baby, didn't do anything, didn't harm anyone, why is that little child born blind? And most religious people, they can't answer it. Oh, it seems God is unjust. Poor innocent creature, the baby was born blind. Because they don't know about karma. They don't know about reincarnation. They don't know what that little child did in his previous lifetime. Just like Kitra Ketu. Chitraketu was a great king, and he had 10 million wives. I mean, that's a lot of responsibility. Unfortunately, none of the 10 million wives could give him a child. And at least in the Vedic culture, when you were the king, the emperor of a vast tract of this world, then it was a responsibility to have a child, especially a male child, who could become the king and take responsibility for the kingdom. And because he could not produce a male child, he was very unhappy. But he was a devotee. So one day Narada Muni came to visit him and saw the king was quite despondent. So he asked the king, why are you so unhappy? You're the king of a vast tract of this world. You have 10 million wives, beautiful wives, and you seem to be quite depressed. What's the problem? He said, yes, Maharaj Chitraketu said, I have 10 million wives, but none of them can give me a child. So Narada Muni said, well, Chitraketu asked Narada Muni, what can I do? So he said, well, I can give you the blessings to get a child, but the child will be both the cause of your happiness and the cause of your distress. Chitraketu Maharaj was very happy to hear that he could get a child. Therefore, he was very happy to get the benediction. And he thought that perhaps the child will be a great source of happiness when it's born, but later on, when it gets older and disobeys me, he'll be the cause of unhappiness. With his principal queen, he had a child, and he called the child Harsha Marsha. Harsha means jubilation, Amarsha means depression. So everyone in the kingdom was very happy that the king finally got a child. But the king and the queen, they only paid attention to this child. And the king's other 9,999,999 wives became neglected. So everyone was happy in the kingdom, except for the 9,999,999 wives. They all became very depressed. So depressed that they decided that the only solution is to kill the child. Then the king will give us some attention. So they poisoned the child, and the child died. Now everyone in the kingdom, especially the Chitraketu and his wife, became very morose, practically hysterical. And everyone in the kingdom began to lament, except for the 9,999,999 wives of the king. They became quite joyful. Now, in the midst of this crying and this lamentation, Narada Muni came back with Parvati Muni and asked the king, why are you so frantically lamenting? And he said, because my son has died. So Narada Muni called Harsha Marsha, the soul that was in the body of Harsha Marsha, to come back and speak to his father and mother. So the soul came back, and Narada Muni asked the soul, he said, why did you leave your father and mother? So Harsha Marsha, the soul who is Harsha Marsha, said, which father and mother? I've had so many fathers and mothers. Which one are you talking about? Well, there's one called Chitraketu and his wife, Kayuti. Why did you leave them? He said, oh, that one. Oh, yeah, that's right. And they, in my last lifetime before this one, I was a king and he was a king, and we were fighting with each other, and he killed me, and I vowed I'd come back and make his life miserable. So when Chitraketu heard that, he became quite detached from his family. Therefore, we've taken birth here, and sometimes, although it appears that we're being put into unjust circumstances, but nothing is unjust. Everything is perfectly arranged by Krishna. The child who is born blind, it is not by accident. Undoubtedly, he did something in his previous lifetimes to put one in that position. That doesn't mean that we should be free to inflict miseries upon others, thinking that I'm only an instrument for the material nature and giving people what they deserve. Because then we're simply accumulating more karma for ourselves, so that we'll be put in a position which will be rather unpleasant in the future. Just like in the Vedic culture, for those in the mode of ignorance who want to eat meat, there are Vedic mantras you chant into the ear of a goat. It's on a full moon night, on a new moon night, when there's no moon, everything is dark. You have to take a goat to a secluded place, perhaps on the top of a mountain, and whisper into the goat's ear, my dear goat, now I'm going to cut your throat. But don't worry, because in the future, you'll come back as a human being, and I'll come back as a goat, and then you'll get the opportunity to cut my throat. If you repeat that mantra enough times, then after a while, when you're eating the goat burger, you lose your taste for it. You start thinking, oh my, goat's going to cut my throat. I'm going to have to come back as a goat and have my throat cut. So after some time, one will stop cutting goats' throats. So we have a choice in the human form of life. We can follow Krishna's directions and utilize and desire to Krishna as the driver, direct us back to the spiritual world. Or we can go around cutting goats' throats and become goats in the future. That's our free will. So people don't know that. For instance, if someone wants to eat anything and everything, he doesn't know that in his future lifetime, he's going to become a pig. Why have to go to a restaurant, spend so much time ordering food, so much energy, cooking and eating and so many different things. Then you have to clean up. Why not become a pig? Then everything tastes like nectar. When a pig is eating stool, he doesn't think, oh, this is disgusting, but there's nothing else. No, he thinks this is sweet like chocolate. Otherwise, Prabhupada said that the pigs are very happy. They're enjoying like anything. The taste, the nectar of stool and everything else. Without enjoying, Prabhupada said, how are they getting fatty? Only if you're enjoying do you get fat. And indeed, if you go to Vrindavan, you'll find many pigs, they live in the sewer. And they open their mouth, and whatever nectar is in the sewer flows in. And all day long, they're eating the choicest remnants of the Vaishnavas. And they're completely happy getting the prasad. But human form of life is not meant for working like a pig or becoming a pig in the future. But the living entity, when it's working to satisfy its senses, and then he's wasting his time. That he should understand, at least theoretically, that he's part and parcel of Krishna. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita, Mamai vangso jiva loke, jiva bhutak sanatana, manakshastran indriyani prakriti stani karshiti. That the living entities in this material world, they are my fragmental parts, and they're all eternal. But due to conditioned life, they're struggling very hard with the six senses, which includes the mind. So we're all just like Krishna. We can all enjoy just like Krishna enjoys with spiritual senses, which can experience unlimited happiness forever. But that's our choice. When we work for Krishna, then gradually we'll develop our spiritual senses and our spiritual body. When we work to gratify the senses, then we are put into different species of life. Just like the finger is connected to the whole body. The finger's business is to work for the body. If the finger thinks, I don't like my fellow fingers, they don't appreciate me, I'm the best finger in this hand, and no one gives me any recognition, I go on strike. Forget about the other fingers. I'm not working at all. I've given up. I'm retiring. So then the finger sees a nice rascal and it thinks, well, I'm hungry. So it starts trying to enjoy the rascal independently. But the finger can enjoy independently. It has to cooperate with the other fingers and bring the rascal to the mouth so it can go to the stomach. And when the stomach enjoys, then the rest of the body enjoys, including the finger. So we, being part and parcel of Krishna, we have an intimate relationship with Krishna, just like a big machine has many parts, and one part in the machine is not the whole machine, but it helps the machine do its function. If you take that part out, then the part becomes useless. It's only valuable when it's connected to the machine. Similarly, we ourselves, we have a business to please Krishna. And when Krishna is pleased, then everyone, including ourselves, are pleased. And when we act independently without trying to please Krishna, then we're just like a part of a machine outside the machine, which has no value, or a finger that's disconnected from the body. So Krishna, he's in one place and he's diffusing his energies everywhere. Just like the sun is in one place and he's diffusing heat, the sun is diffusing heat and light everywhere. As it says, Eka Desha Sitasya Gya, Joshnad Visrisiyata, Prasya Brahmana Shaktis Tatedam Akilam Jagat. So Krishna is in one place and everywhere his energies that are working. So we're never disconnected from Krishna, as Krishna told the gopis. We can't be disconnected from Krishna. We're always intimately connected with him. But when we don't see that connection, that's called Maya. And when we see that connection and we utilize those energies, when we desire to utilize those energies, we think, we feel, and we will to utilize those energies in Krishna's service, then Krishna makes arrangements through his material energy or his spiritual energy so that we're engaged in his spiritual service and his devotional service. And then we can experience how everyone and everything is connected to Krishna. In our connection with Krishna, when Krishna reveals himself, when he sees our sincerity to serve him, then we become ecstatically in love with Krishna and ecstatically in love with everyone and everything as it's related to Krishna. Then we'll no longer be disturbed by these false conceptions that this material world is mine, or it belongs to, I am part of the material world, or the material world belongs to me. That we'll see, actually, I belong to Krishna, And this material world also belongs to Krishna. Then we can actually understand what the spiritual world is. When we can understand ourselves as spiritual beings, when we act as spiritual beings, then we can also understand the spiritual world. The spiritual world means that there's no material energy. There's something spiritual energy. In the land, in this land that we're living in this material world, it is unconscious. But in the spiritual world, the land, the water, the trees, the birds, everything is conscious. Everything is of the same spiritual energy. Here, if you go to a tree, you can only generally get one fruit from the tree. If you go to a mango tree, you can get a mango. But in the spiritual world, you can go there, and if you want any fruit or flower, that Kalpavriksha tree can supply it because it's spiritual. So when we understand ourselves as spiritual, as actually we are, then we can understand what the spiritual world is. That if you understand the spiritual energy, then you can understand God, because the spiritual energy is a sample of God, of Krishna. Just like if you're boiling rice, if you take one of the particles of rice, one of the pieces of rice, out of the pot while it's boiling and test it, you can understand what all the other rice is like, just by testing one grain of rice. So when we realize we're part and parcel of God, then we can understand that we're small, but God is great. Krishna is great. And the small is meant to serve the great. Even here in the material world, people go to the office and they serve the boss because the boss is greater than they are. Of course, if they don't serve, then they don't get a paycheck. And if they don't get a paycheck, they don't get anything to eat. So they're being controlled by the boss. Actually, they're being controlled by the money. But because we're small, we're always controlled. Either we're going to be controlled by a boss, some other boss, or we're going to be controlled by Krishna. The conclusion is when we forget to serve Krishna, that's called material life. And we serve Krishna with love and affection, understanding that we're very intimately related as part and parcel to him, that is spiritual life. Everyone has to be a servant, but generally speaking, due to ignorance, people are serving wrongly. If they serve anything other than Krishna, then they're going to be frustrated. However, if we serve Krishna, then we'll be satisfied. Our Krishna will be satisfied, and our life will be successful. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Spasiba. Thank you. Any questions? Agnihotra.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. There is one question from Lalita Sundari Devidasi from St. Petersburg. In the commentary of Srimad Bhagavatam 11.9.5, it is said that without knowing one's spiritual form, one cannot develop a love for Shri Krishna. How does this awareness come about?
That's in the Srimad Bhagavatam?
11.9.5 commentary.
Well, all these instructions have to be taken in context. When there are two different stages of devotional service, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Mat Shita Mat Kata Prana, Bodhyantas Parashparam, Katayantas from Nityam, Tushanti Charamanti Cha. Krishna, first of all, says that he's God. Now, to realize God is not so easy. To realize someone who has unlimited beauty is really beyond anything we can imagine. What to speak of someone who knows everything in the past, present, and future. To know such a person is not easy. Even to know the President of the United States It's not easy. You can't just walk up to the White House gate, knock on the door and say, I'm here. And who are you? I want to meet the president or prime minister or any important person. One has to be qualified in order to do so. So what to speak of the president of all the presidents, Krishna? It is not so easy to meet him. We have to be qualified. But to become qualified, Krishna has given us this process, beginning with hearing from those who know more about Krishna than we do. Just like if we want to go, right now I'm in, well, say you want to go from Moscow to St. Petersburg. Then you take shelter of a map and it tells you where St. Petersburg is in relation to Moscow. And if you take your car there, there'll be different signs that tell you which direction to go to Moscow. Now, if you see a sign that says Sochi, which is to the south of Moscow, you probably can understand you're going the wrong direction. Therefore, you have to know where Sochi is, where St. Petersburg is, and where all the points are in between, so you can be confident you're actually going the right direction. Someone may not be in St. Petersburg, but you may not see a sign for St. Petersburg, but if you see a sign that's on the road map towards St. Petersburg, then that gives you an indication that you're going the right direction. Similarly, for those who know more than we do about the process of achieving Krishna, we can hear from them. And if they've heard from someone who's actually Krishna conscious, then that can help us make progress towards our goal. Now, when we're trying to achieve our goal, there are two different types of persons. Well, first of all, we should say that the instructions received deal with two different things, chitta and prana, both of which we have to learn how to take charge of. Chitta means our consciousness. Where we put our consciousness. Our goal is to put it in Krishna, to think about Krishna's name, his form, his quality, and his pastimes, 24 hours a day. And to use our prana, our energy, only in Krishna's service, by chanting Hare Krishna, cooking for Krishna, chanting by distributing books for Krishna, cleaning for Krishna, doing something for Krishna. And some devotees who know more than we do, they'll inspire us and direct us how to do it better than we're already doing it. So we hear from them, and if they've heard from the person who's perfectly engaged in Krishna service 24 hours a day, and is fully conscious of Krishna, then we can make progress. And our first progress is towards liberation. Liberation from our misconceptions, as it says in this purport, that I am this body and the things in relation to this body belongs to me. To become free from these two misconceptions is called liberation. The more we become liberated, the more, according to Bhagavad Gita, we feel tushanti. We feel satisfaction. That I'm becoming relieved from the anxiety of the material world and the doubts and ignorance that accompany my material existence here. The more we experience that, the more we become satisfied. But for those who are liberated from all material conceptions of life, when they execute devotional service, then they feel ramanti. They feel great ecstatic pleasure. And as that pleasure increases, then they become more and more qualified to meet Krishna personally. For those who are executing devotional service, Krishna appears in the form of their service. And his presence becomes, our awareness of his presence becomes manifested in our service. For instance, in the morning, when the sun comes up, we may not see the sun directly, but when we experience the light of the sun in our room, then we understand the sun's presence. So when we sincerely perform devotional service, even when we're not liberated completely from our misconceptions, material misconceptions, still we experience Krishna's presence more and more, and we can understand that Krishna is there, although we may not directly perceive him in his transcendental form as Krishna. But for those who are liberated, as they become more and more in the fire of devotional service, for instance, if you take an iron and you put it into the fire, it becomes hotter and hotter and hotter, and eventually becomes like fire. So wherever you touch that iron, it'll act like fire. It no longer acts like iron. To realize Krishna in his original form, we have to become just like Krishna. That is, we have to be completely absorbed 24 hours a day in thinking about Krishna and engage in his service. After liberation, that's possible, because liberation begins from Nishtha, or when we're steadily engaged in Krishna's service, and we're always remembering him, we're always thinking about him, in spite of whatever distractions may be there. But gradually, as one becomes more and more absorbed in Krishna's service and in Krishna consciousness, then even distractions go away, and one is absorbed in thinking about Krishna 24 hours a day with great enthusiasm. That's called asakti. And the pleasure from devotional service becomes so great at that stage that just like a fish cannot exist outside of water, so one cannot exist without being in Krishna consciousness, thinking about Krishna with great enthusiasm 24 hours a day. At that stage, one becomes actually aware directly of Krishna to some degree. At the stage of asakti, one may hear Krishna's flute sometimes, or it may even appear that Krishna has come and touched one and then disappeared. So that's when one actually first has direct contact with Krishna. But that's a very elevated stage. And as that increases to the stage of bhava, and one's original feelings towards Krishna are awakened, then one can understand one's spiritual identity at this stage of bhava. But and that's only one ray in the sunlight of prema. So devotional service is quite inconceivable for us at the present time. Pure devotional service and pure Krishna consciousness. Still, we make progress, and we feel positive benefit from Krishna service by practicing sadhana bhakti and learning how to think about Krishna with enthusiasm and affection, with priti. Or we perform our service with care and attention, and gradually we make progress towards becoming liberated from our material conceptions of life, become free from this false identification with these gross and subtle material bodies, and with the conception that things in relationship to this body are mine. It's my body, it's my family, it's my nation, it's mine. Then we're on our path towards actually directly experiencing Krishna in the future as our service becomes purified, as our consciousness becomes purified, as we become liberated from all material conceptions, then gradually we'll stay in the fire of devotional service and gradually become elevated to the platform where we'll become qualified to get Krishna's mercy and experience Krishna directly. Thank you for the question. Any other questions?
Yes, Гуру Махарадж, Матаджи Валангвата, вам долго перевести, если я боял Google переводчики уже?
Хари Кришна, am I on an English channel at the moment? Maharaj, can you hear me?
We have one question from Mataji Vaishnavi, and I asked.
Okay.
Ага, хорошо, я переведу тогда. Guru Maharaj, the question from Vaishnavi Devidasi.
Okay.
Krishna, please accept my obeisances, all glories to Prabhupada. If senior devotees follow worldly scholars and lead us by their example. In Krishna's plan, even if this path is deadly.
Ni pani mayo.
Не понимаете.
Slowly, medley.
If senior devotees follow to scientist, the material scientist.
Yes.
If senior devotees follow to material scientist.
Yes.
And is this plan Krishna, even this following is can give to us death, and we can die and have problem with health.
What's that?
Прабhu, давайте я переведу.
Давайте, да, спасибо.
Swami, the question is, if senior devotees follow mundane scientists and lead us by their example, is this a Krishna's plan or is this path deathly dangerous?
Well, depends what material science, there is called the relative world. And in the relative world, those who
Имейте в виду, мы находимся в относительном мире. Те, кто знают о Кришне, они являются учеными, все остальные просто спекулируют. Спекулируют. Это не значит, что они ничего не знают. Они просто спекулируют о том, что они ошибаются. Например, материалистичные ученые. Человек получает Нобелевскую премию в 20-х годах, в 1920 году, открыв, что свет — это частица. А в 1940 году еще один ученый открыл, что свет — это волна, и он получил Нобелевскую премию. И в 60-х ученый получил опять премию, что свет — это и волна, и частица одновременно. Они так и не понимают, что это такое. Материальная наука означает, что они просто пытаются. Они могут создать машину или компьютер, но в конце концов они просто техники, они не ученые. Когда мы говорим о настоящей науке, как, например, медицина, как говорит Кришна по Бхагавад-гите, что глупцы, они не могут понять, как материальное тело. Глупцы не могут понять, как живые существа свое тело оставляют и каким телом они наслаждаются под влиянием трех гун материальной природы. В общем-то говоря, тело или ученые, которые медициной, допустим, увлекаются, они не могут сказать ничего, потому что они даже не знают, каким телом они сами обладают. Они не знают, что случится с ними, когда они оставят это тело. Поэтому их наука, она очень ограниченная. Конечно, если в вас переехала машина, они могут ваши кости вместе собрать. Они не полностью бесполезны. Но, в общем говоря, с хроническими...
Their track record in helping people cure disease is practically zero. They're expert at covering over the symptoms, but they're not very good at actually helping people overcome disease. Therefore, if we actually want to know what's wrong, we have to study Krishna's sciences. Krishna has given Ayurveda, he's given Jyotirveda, he's given Dhanurveda, he's given so many sciences. They may be incomplete, and the practitioners of these sciences may not be as expert as previously, but at least we know that there is a science dealing with all these different fields that come from Krishna, and they're not on their same level they're not speculative sciences. They may not be perfectly passed down in disciple succession, but at least are existent to some extent within the present society. There's some opportunity to find a bona fide practitioner of these sciences and see how they can help us to whatever degree possible. Of course, they require discipline, change of diet, change of lifestyle, etc. So often we've been brought up in a culture where most of us, if not all of us, haven't not really trained up in these sciences. And we're not used to regulating our diet. We're not used to regulating our lifestyle. And therefore, we can't actually take advantage of the Vedic sciences so easily because we're not, for one reason or another, capable or willing to do what's necessary to actually improve our health. So naturally, many of us, we take shelter of covering over the symptoms. But sometimes the material sciences, they don't even have they can't even cover the symptoms very well. They cause more trouble. So that's up to us individually to understand what actually works and what doesn't work. To blindly accept, well, some leaders, they have more knowledge than we do about the spiritual science. They've been practicing devotional service sincerely for many decades, and therefore they can give us enlightenment about how to chant Hare Krishna, how to perform devotional service. But many of them have no knowledge whatsoever and how to keep healthy. That's why most of them many of them are sick. Many of them have taken shelter of the present medical procedures to have multiple operations. So someone who's sick, consistently sick, and having many, many operations because of their inability to, well, because of the chronic diseases that they have and the results of them, they're not a good example to follow, at least medically, unless you want to enjoy being sick and having operations. Better to find someone who's actually healthy. They can teach you how to become healthy, or someone who knows the science by which you can follow and actually improve your health and avoid chronic illness. So it is not that if someone's spiritually advanced, that they necessarily are expert at health. If you want to improve your health, you should go to someone who's expert at health, not someone who's diseased or some so-called expert who actually causes more disease than they actually solve. The number 3 killer in America, there's 2 things combined together, but both of them are caused by the present medical doctors. One part of that deaths in America, in other words, heart attacks, cancer, are the 2 leading causes of death in America. And the third cause is prescribed medicine and operations and medical procedures which were incorrectly done. Now, if you want to take shelter of people who are so-called experts, who they themselves are the third cause of death in America, at least, then that's up to the devotee. If you have no other alternative, and at least you want to cover over the symptoms, whatever reason, one may take shelter of such experts, but a risk comes with that also. And one should not blame anyone else besides oneself for taking such risks. You can't blame the person, your leader. You took shelter of the leader probably because he was spiritually advanced. But if you take shelter of them when they're, for medical reasons, knowing well that they're not expert at that field, then you do so at your own risk. All right, so I think we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Grantaraj, Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada. Jai. Gaur Haribol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Спасибо большое. Очень рада вас видеть и слышать, Гуру Махарадж.
Thank you very much,
Спасибо.
Kumari.
Thank you.
Хари Кришна, dear Guru Maharaj. Хари Кришна, дорогие вайшнавы.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, brothers and sisters. Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Харе Кришна.
Харе Кришна, спасибо огромное.
Харе Кришна, низкий всем поклон. Харибол.